Welcome to the debate. Imagine, if you will, a brilliant software engineering student. I mean, they can write flawless, incredibly complex code.
Right.
Their technical understanding of systems architecture is just top tier. But they walk into 10 consecutive job interviews and they get rejected every single time.
Oh, wow, 10 in a row.
10 in a row. And why? Well, not because of a flaw in their programming, but because they stumbled over British corporate jargon in the interview. Or maybe they couldn't articulate their process in fluent, standardized English.
It really is the ultimate bottleneck. I mean, you can possess a world-class mind, but if the mandated medium of exchange is completely foreign or, unnaturally imposed, the knowledge simply gets trapped.
Exactly. It gets trapped. And that is the core of our discussion today. We are unpacking the incredibly complex role of English language proficiency in Indian higher education.
And its undeniable impact on employability, which is massive.
Absolutely massive. We are grounding this in a highly specific and honestly fascinating case study of an autonomous institute in Kolhapur, Maharashtra. That's CSIBER. The Chhatrapati Shahu Institute of Business Education and Research.
Right, and specifically, we're looking at their initiative to partner directly with Cambridge University to implement the Business English Certificate, widely known as the BEC.
Yes, the BEC. And the tension we are exploring here is profound.
It really is. Because when an educational institution deliberately adopts a foreign, standardized linguistic framework to boost employability, is that simply a necessary pragmatic step toward global integration?
Right.
Or does it perpetuate a restrictive, colonial stress that ignores how local communication actually works on the ground?
Well, I will be arguing that adopting standardized global frameworks like the Cambridge BEC is an absolutely vital, pragmatic solution. It is the most effective bridge across that agonizing gap between academic knowledge and actual employability in a globalized market.
And I will argue that relying on imported standards is fundamentally flawed. I mean, it perpetuates a deeply entrenched colonial legacy, it relies on intangible metrics, and it completely overlooks the necessity of diverse, localized platforms for authentic knowledge transfer.
So, to really understand this, we need to look at the practical, on-the-ground reality that gave birth to this initiative at CSIBER.
The actual historical context.
Exactly. The institute was established in 1976 by a true visionary, the late Dr. A.D. Shinde. He was a chartered accountant, a dean of commerce, and, well, he was watching a recurring tragedy unfold.
The gap in the students' transition to the workforce?
Yes. His postgraduate students had the technical knowledge. They knew the accounting principles, the management theories, but they were suffering from delayed employment and a massive loss of confidence.
Because of the language barrier.
Right. The source material refers to this as a problem of wrong contextual interpretation. They were misinterpreting the tone of business emails or struggling to present data in a corporate format.
Which is a very specific type of communication.
It is. Their technical brilliance was locked behind a linguistic barrier. And Dr. Shinde knew that if you don't fix that, you are failing the main objective of education.
I don't disagree that a barrier existed, but we have to interrogate why that specific barrier exists and what it actually represents.
Well, it exists because the global market demands a common operating language. And to fix this, CSIBER made a highly strategic decision in 1995 to pursue academic autonomy.
Which was a big deal at the time.
A huge deal. For those who don't know, a traditional board of studies in an Indian university is a highly centralized committee. If you want to change, say, one paragraph in a syllabus because a new technology emerged, it can take years of bureaucratic meetings.
It's glacial.
Glacial. So autonomy allowed CSIBER to bypass that entirely. Between 2009 and 2017, they went out and signed a direct partnership with Cambridge University to provide BEC certification.
Right, the Business English Certificate.
Yes, and this wasn't just a generic grammar class. The BEC tests specific business applications, negotiating, writing memos, analyzing reports.
Practical stuff.
Exactly. By giving about 300 students a year this certification, they didn't just say, speak better. They provided a tangible, internationally recognized benchmark that gave those students a measurable advantage in the job market.
I understand the instinct to solve an immediate employment crisis. I really do. But we cannot divorce this pragmatic intervention from its philosophical and historical foundation.
Okay, but
Hear me out. When you impose English as the ultimate benchmark of professional worth in India, you are not just introducing a neutral tool. You are activating a legacy.
a legacy of colonialism.
Exactly. We have to look at the historical context provided by scholars like Ostik Madhav and Syed Mahmud in our source material. This traces directly back to Thomas Macaulay's 1835 Minute on Education.
Wait, 1835?
1835. Macaulay literally wrote the policy stating the British needed a class of persons who were Indian in blood, but English in taste, in opinions, and in intellect.
Well, that's historically true, but...
The entire introduction of the language was to create clerks and mediators to carry out administrative orders. It was never designed to facilitate the liberated free transfer of knowledge.
Right.
It was designed to create administrative compliance.
But you're talking about 1835. You can't honestly argue that a modern data scientist, using English to collaborate on a global tech project today, is acting as a colonial clerk.
The function is different, yes.
The economic reality is vastly different.
The economic reality has shifted, sure, but the psychological framework absolutely has not. The text points out something very critical here. Forcing non-native speakers to adapt to foreign standards creates a lingering colonial stress.
Colonial stress.
Yes. We are evaluating an entire generation of students based on an impression of English carried over from people who are taught to mimic the natives of the UK.
I think that's a bit of a leap.
Is it? Furthermore, if you look at the actual data from the CSIBER case study, it reveals a glaring flaw. The text explicitly admits that the actual contribution of the Cambridge BEC to long-term employability remained unmapped and intangible.
Intangible doesn't mean non-existent.
No, but it means unverified. There is no systematic check on how recruiters actually judge a candidate's lifelong communication skills.
Right, because hiring is subjective.
Exactly. A recruiter looks at a resume, sees the Cambridge brand name, and just makes an assumption. We have essentially created a system that optimizes for the job interview rather than the actual job.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective.
Go ahead.
Dismissing it as just, gaming the system ignores the mechanics of how hiring actually functions in reality. Before CyBER brought in the Cambridge MOU, they noted there was absolutely no feedback mechanism to measure how language skills contributed to employment.
Because it's hard to measure.
Very hard. Operating in the dark was hurting students. What the Cambridge branding did, demonstrably, was improve the perception of employability, and perception is the gateway to opportunity.
But is perception enough?
It brought a massive motivational change to the Institute. Students started interacting more, engaging more deeply with the material.
Correct check is possible on the ability to communicate effectively during recruitment.
Right, it's subjective.
So if it's just optics, we are failing the students. If the real-world contribution of the BEC is unmapped, we aren't fundamentally improving knowledge transfer. We are just placing blind faith in a foreign brand.
I wouldn't call it just optics. Think of the Cambridge BEC like a passport.
A passport?
Yeah, a passport. Now, holding a passport does not prove that you are an experienced, culturally sensitive traveler, right?
Sure.
It doesn't prove you know how to navigate the complex social dynamics of a foreign country. But it gets you across the border.
Okay, I follow.
Without it, you are stranded at the checkpoint. The inadequate communication CyBER observed was leading to severe loss of confidence. By equipping students with this certification, they removed that immediate paralyzing barrier.
They got them the interview.
They got the students across the border into the professional realm. You can't develop lifelong professional skills if you never get hired in the first place.
That is a fascinating analogy. But if the passport requires you to erase or suppress your own cultural identity to be considered valid, we have a massive structural problem.
I don't think they're erasing their identity.
Well, if the test isn't accurately measuring their lifelong skills, what is it actually doing? I'd argue it's inflicting an immense amount of psychological pressure.
You're going back to the colonial stress idea.
The text highlights this colonial stress explicitly. The style and methods of using English in these formal settings place intense stress on non-natives completely without their choice, simply because English is viewed as the sole carrier of modernity.
It is the global standard, though.
But when you associate English exclusively with intelligence and progress, you inherently devalue native linguistic frameworks. It creates an environment where a student is so stressed about how they are pronouncing a word that they cannot focus on what they are actually analyzing.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. I agree the historical imposition was rooted in colonial administration. We can't deny that.
Right.
But we have to look at what English has organically become in the decades since. The source material cites linguist David Crystal.
Ah, yes.
He notes how language uniquely captures the breadth of human endeavor. More specifically, the text cites M. Vijayalakshmi, who explains that English is an indispensable link language in India.
A link language, sure.
It is essential not just for global trade, but for interstate and intrastate communication within India's incredibly diverse linguistic landscape, especially with the IT revolution. Think of English as the operating system of modern industry.
The operating system?
Yes, the OS. The technical skills a student learns, the accounting, the coding, the management theory, that's the hardware.
Okay.
You can have the most powerful hardware in the world, but if you don't have the OS to interface with the global market, that hardware just sits there in the dark.
So everyone has to use the same OS?
Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, why not just translate everything into local languages? The reality of global supply chains and real-time tech development makes that practically impossible right now.
Right now, maybe.
You cannot manage a global logistics network without a unified operating system. It's a functional requirement of the era.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered what actually happens when you deploy that operating system on the floor of a modern IT company?
What do you mean?
The theoretical idea of English as a frictionless universal OS falls apart the second people start solving real problems. The source material points to a very explicit practical finding.
Which is?
Even when the official medium of business is English, non-deliberative code switching takes place constantly.
Oh, people mixing languages?
Exactly. And it happens spontaneously, regardless of the formal rules. A manager might use English for the technical terminology, saying, we need to patch the API integration. But they will instantly switch to Marathi syntax to explain the urgency of the problem to their team.
Because it's faster.
Because it conveys human emotion and local nuance better. We need this done by midnight, or the client will walk. The emotion is local.
Fair enough.
The text explicitly warns that claiming English as the definitive global language is dangerous. Technology is rapidly changing how we communicate. Real-time translation tech is evolving, and meanwhile, vital native languages are dying.
True, languages are being lost.
Banking everything on a monolithic English standard ignores the reality of how human beings actually interact and collaborate.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you are assuming that cyber, or really any modern institution, is forcing a monolith.
They adopted Cambridge standards. That's pretty monolithic.
But the brilliance of this case study is that their institutional structure actually adapted to the exact nuance of code switching you are describing.
How so?
They didn't just blindly enforce the Cambridge BEC on everyone and ban local languages. Because they were autonomous, they were agile, they actively merged the Board of Studies for Communication into the General Management Board.
Which, to be fair, is a very unusual move in traditional academia.
Highly unusual. Normally, English communication is treated as a generic literature requirement, like read Shakespeare to learn business.
Right.
By moving it to general management, they recognized communication as a dynamic business skill. They introduced a parallel internal paper on managerial communication that addressed contextual, on-the-ground realities like the code switching you mentioned.
So they offered both.
Exactly. And the Cambridge BEC. It became an optional, additional choice for students who wanted that specific global competitive advantage. They proved you can offer rigorous global standards without erasing the local context.
I come at it from a different way. The only reason they had to go to those extraordinary lengths, merging boards, creating parallel papers, bypassing the university to sign international MOUs, is because the traditional statutory bodies governing education are fundamentally broken.
Oh, absolutely broken.
The text is incredibly clear on this. Statutory bodies are far too rigid. They try to enforce a unanimity of opinion among a small group of experts.
Which never works.
It inevitably creates inadequate, inflexible structures. They are obsessed with jurisdiction and precedence. The entire Cambridge BEC initiative is, at its core, a workaround for a massive systemic failure.
A workaround, yeah.
It highlights that the top-down approach to language education simply fails the stakeholders.
Wait, on that point, I am in absolute agreement with you. The rigidity of statutory bodies is exactly why CSIBER's decision to pursue autonomy in 1995 was such a masterstroke.
It was necessary.
You cannot wait for a centralized university bureaucracy to update its syllabus when the global job market is evolving every single day.
No, you can't.
By becoming autonomous, they could engage in proactive curriculum development. They could take necessary inputs from actual industry experts and implement a customized exam system.
So the rigidity of the traditional system is a given.
Yes. The debate is really about how an institution responds to it. CSIBER's response was a necessary disruption that directly secured their students' livelihoods.
It was a disruption, yes, but we must be incredibly careful about what we use to replace the old system.
Meaning the BEC?
Meaning if we replace a rigid local bureaucracy with a rigid reliance on a foreign brand certification, have we truly solved the problem of knowledge transfer, or have we just outsourced the bottleneck?
Well, I believe we have solved it, at least in the pragmatic sense. If we step back and synthesize this, we have to acknowledge that English undoubtedly brings immense historical baggage.
Immense.
And yes, the precise metrics for measuring its long-term impact on a career, like recruiter feedback, are imperfect. But autonomous institutions operating in the real world have to be pragmatic.
They have to get students jobs.
Exactly. Providing frameworks like the Cambridge BEC give students the necessary, recognized tools to navigate the global economy. CyBER honored its foundational mission to make employability a reality, rather than just an academic abstraction.
Right.
They recognize that while the system isn't perfect, refusing to play the game only hurts the students who are left standing at the border without a passport.
And my conclusion is that while securing employment is undeniably crucial, we must remain highly critical of relying exclusively on inherited colonial frameworks to achieve it.
We shouldn't accept them blindly.
No, we shouldn't. The source material leads us to a profound realization. In a rapidly changing technological landscape, English simply cannot be the only platform for the transfer of knowledge.
Fair point.
Imposing it as the ultimate metric creates unnecessary colonial stress, and it completely ignores the reality of natural code switching. What we really need, as the text suggests, are special live forums to continually address how language is actually used in professional situations.
Rather than just standardized tests.
Exactly. Rather than testing how well a student can mimic a standardized ideal, we need an education system that values the authentic transmission of ideas over the mere optics of proficiency.
It is an incredibly delicate balance, but it's clear we have found a point of strong convergence today.
We definitely have.
Both of us agree that traditional, statutory, educational bodies are often far too slow-moving to solve these complex, interdisciplinary language issues.
Absolutely. The need for autonomous innovation is undeniable. The old structures simply cannot keep pace with the linguistic realities of the modern floor.
And that reflects the sheer complexity of balancing global standards with local cultural realities. There is clearly much more to explore here regarding the historical data, the evolution of real-time translation tech, and the everyday realities of the workplace.
A lot more to unpack.
We leave it to you, our listeners, to draw your own conclusions about the true cost and the true value of globalized education. And the next time you think about the transition from the classroom to the boardroom, remember that the path is rarely a clean mechanical schematic.
It never is.
More often than not, it is a complex, constantly shifting translation. Thank you for joining us.